So this episode with Daniel from USARK, Florida, Daniel Parker, was recorded on May 18th. So please be aware that this stuff is from May and April. So thank you for watching this. For my podcast and stuff, you know how much money I've made off of this? Not a
lot, I'm sure.
Yeah, not a damn dime. Like, I'm literally, and I don't have a lot of viewership, and like, I've known since the 6th grade that I am not the guy that's usually in front. This is why I asked Bill Stewart to co-host the psychological stuff with me, because I think that would have brought in more people. I think that would have showed more people, because there's so many things that you could say about me, but I know how to put studies together, from psychology to sociology to biology, chemistry, physics. I've got an associate's in physics, a bachelor's in polymer. I did a video on my degree, my bachelor's, and the kind of degrees that are brand new to the, like, really new, like in the last 5 years. The stuff you will learn in those degrees have been done in the last 15 years. That's insane, to go to college and actually study something that happened in the century. Yeah. So they're very new degrees and stuff. So I have a polymer chemistry bachelor's focused on medical tech. I studied how to target cancer cells, Zika and Ebola, plastics, manufacturing. I worked in manufacturing and stuff. I've studied chaos theory. I computer programmed it. I actually did a study in nonverbal human communication using a role-playing game. It was really fun. And then I did a study in a quantitative and qualitative study in turnover rate in fast food industry. So I get this. Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. So I know how to do that. So that's what that whole thing was, to test people's empathy in the industry, and it's been very fascinating. Mm-hmm. My lights are about to go out. Give me just a second to put a light on. But I took some of the hardest classes in undergrad with a physics degree. I worked at Lazy Boy while I did it. So I built chairs. So I worked Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. to 2:30 in the morning, and then went to school full time for physics. Now, I have friends that are in the, they have studies in music. I have a blind friend that actually plays the piano. He was one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my life for playing the piano kind of thing.
That's awesome.
I
have a degree in music.
That's why I bring it up. I watched him actually sit down at a keyboard, at a piano, and just start playing. He did not fill out the keys. He did not actually fill the keys themselves. He just started playing.
Yeah, I mean, once you get the muscle memory, a lot of times you don't need to look. You just kind of know the spacing of your fingers and know how it all feels.
Yeah, I am having a dandy time with this. But one of the other hardest classes I've ever heard of was there we go. Yeah, it's not like it makes me look, heavier or anything. But one of the hardest classes I've ever heard of that I never took was music theory. Is it?
Well, I mean, it just depends on where everybody has different intelligences in different areas, I mean, I've always done really well with music theory. Some people found it very difficult. It kind of came innately to me, just like chemistry might come innately to someone else, So I've always understood music theory even before I took a class on it. It was just something, even from when I was a kid, somehow in my brain, I knew how it all worked. And then learning the terminology was just kind of figuring out what to call things that I already knew how they worked in my head. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's not to brag or anything, but it's just a certain area that I seem to have excelled in that way.
I perfectly understand that. Music theory would go in one ear and out the other. I suck at grammar and spelling, so therefore they put me in the learning disabled class. My brother is actually learning disabled. I'm from the backwoods. I come from one of the worst schools in the country, and I went back to college literally labeled as a learning disabled, and I went back to college at 26, and that's when I started for physics. And I mean, the human mind is so simple to me. To me, that's like your music. Humans are that way for me. Some of the stuff that I have learned from those studies that I put together, the breeders, it's like, dude, it was so fascinating because I screwed up the interview. I had Jay Lewis, who breeds Savannah monitors. He was the first person in America to do it. And then Brad Nelson, he's a local guy here, and he breeds blue tongues. So there's a lot of overlap in behavior from blue tongues to monitors. So it's like, well, let's see what the difference is here between these. And then I screwed up the second half of the video, so we had to redo it. But I watched. God, what was it? It was Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Eli Manning on Monday Night Football. Right after I did that interview, those two guys were Jay and Brad were so passionate, and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were so passionate. Like, it was the exact same level of passion for what they were doing. So I'm like, what's the commonality here? There's this saying of, okay, so what defines insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. As a breeder or a football player, you kind of do that. Like, you literally, like, it's like you do almost the same thing kind of over and over again.
Yeah, but there's a level of intelligence to that. I mean, I'm a former athlete also, like in high school and stuff, not anything serious, but I've always been into sports. But you can see it that there's a level of intelligence there, like somebody like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. That's why I like to watch the Manning cast on Monday Night Football rather than the regular broadcasters, because they see the whole thing in a different way and in a brilliant way. And you can take two people that have very similar physical attributes, but how they react in that situation is totally different, and it takes that level of intelligence to react in real time to what they see in front of them in a fraction of a second. So yeah, it's all really interesting stuff.
I've got a video on what I believe Mahomes is. Mahomes is like me, and I don't know if you watched that one or not.
You look
really
just
good.
like him.
I know, right? Like, it's just like, yeah, we're like brothers. It's like, wow. I'm sure there's some times that he's like, no, he would rather have me as a brother than his own brother, but that's besides the point. But no, it's I love neuroscience. It's the only thing that I would ever even consider going back to school for. I love putting studies together and love doing them, and science I love learning more than I love science, if that makes sense. So it doesn't matter whether it's social science or any other science. So learning from TED Talks and how the brain works and stuff. And it's the frontal lobe's your brake system. There's a modeling here on the right side of your brain. Animals have the same thing where it's, okay, so if everything's running out of the woods, are they not going to run with it? That's empathy. That's an actual form of empathy. It's not what we think of as empathy, because they don't have that, but they do have a form. It is a survival tactic thing. And so further down is your imagination retrieval. And then further down is your cerebral cortex. So there's an actual line here, but it's not on the outside of your brain. One thing that they found with Einstein is that his brain was a little bit bigger, but it wasn't because he had more neurons. It was because he had more myelin. So actually what's happening is certain things in your childhood develop your brain. And I think me and Mahomes have something similar where our cerebral cortex, our imagination, our empathy, and our frontal lobes are actually like that. Myelin is more than a normal person's. So as you talk about this, it's okay. So if we talk about empathy, what I have learned to look for in basic empathy is, does that individual edit another person through their own experience? That's not necessarily empathy, but that is a sign that they can empathize, that their brain does have that capacity. Now, when you're thinking about somebody like me and Mahomes, we're going to talk about seeing it and feeling it. So he's seeing the field. He's empathizing with the other players. So he knows where they're most likely going to be. And so he doesn't have to look over there because he sees it. He knows how it is in his head. And I think that's been very helpful. So it's almost like magic, like nobody else like fully understands it. It's from a neural standpoint. But when you're looking at like psychopathy, it's the exact opposite. That person will never be able to edit another person through their own experience. And so that's what you want to look. And so you should never go in thinking you're going to find that, ever. And that's why I tell you, Beretta is not a psychopath. In some of your clips, he actually does show a sign of editing others through his own experience. And I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying he's good at it. But what that tells us is that there is something that we should be able to do to increase that. It has to be a manipulation tactic of some sort, but it still should have an impact. He is capable of getting to, but you may actually have to reprogram his brain through manipulation tactics. And I'm going to tell you right now that I actually cried. I kept saying that on things. I cried watching you guys. I told Tipping Scales weeks before that happened that we should do that. Like, what you guys did is how we have to behave. And I was told that that was wrong because of what FWC officers did was wrong. And I'm like, no, I don't condone it. If Mr. Coffee had looked at me and said, dude, will you help me like get rid of the body cam with the bodies? I would have 100% helped. 100% of out. It wouldn't even be, my stomach fucking turned at that shit. I was so mad. There was moments I had to, I made a video for you that's like, okay, so I had a moment where I started to calm down, stop listening to podcasts, listen to music, and I felt like I was breaking down all of a sudden because I was calming down. And I worry about that with you. And apparently that did happen to Mr. Coffee. And I mean, like, but yet at the end of the day, the people who did this, the FWC officers, are still human. They're not monsters. I really do believe after watching that meeting, it is a lack of leadership on the board and the staff together. That's the whole thing. That whole puzzle just fits there. And thinking about these guys must have done this, must have been told to do this in the past. And then here's where I want to make sure that you understand that Miss McAdams actually confirmed that Mr. Coffee did tell them to euthanize the animals.
Well,
Camp Kinnon, we don't know the full story.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed Chris Coffee multiple times, and also Bill. I just got off the phone with Bill just a little while before we started here. Yeah. And I think that the debate is not whether Coffee did eventually agree to it, but what led into that. I mean, Coffee said that he was threatened with arrest if he didn't.
Traumatized.
And another thing is that we've requested all the body cam. We have not received that section of body cam that if that happened, like FWC has kind of implied that it happened, that he just invited them in to come euthanize his snakes. There's no proof showing that. So even though FWC's proof has asserted that that happened, they don't have any proof of that. So we're not saying that Coffee did not eventually agree to that, but he really had no choice. And remember, these people he's terrified of them. He is terrified.
Sure that Beretta can't use that against you, because he will use that to say that you lied, but yet you didn't lie. Because, and Mr. Coffee, I mean, when you're talking about trauma, the brain does weird things. So, and we can't say for sure that those officers weren't actually trying to be nice. They just had no idea what the fuck they were doing. And
well, you can see at certain points in the body cam that we do have.
I don't think they were faking. They had no reason.
That it seemed like they felt bad about what they were doing. And Chris Coffey asked one of them, I can't remember which one, but he said, "Is this what you signed up to do? Is this what you wanted to do?" And they said, "No, I wanted to be in conservation." So
before people euthanize me for saying this, because I know how hard like people want to punch back at me for saying this stuff, but it's like, no, these guys are normal people doing something that was almost traumatic to them too. And if they're not being held accountable, then why do they care what the body footage shows?
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm sure it was traumatizing to them. And it was extremely traumatizing to Chris, though. I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, because a lot of this stuff's very personal.
Yeah, it is.
But he has really struggled. I'll just put it at that. It's been a very, very emotionally.
I wish I could give you a hug. Because honestly, the way you handled that FWC meeting, I cried, because of just how much joy it brought me to see that you and to see everybody else follow your lead. I'm like, did this guy like pull this straight out of my brain? Like, did this guy like get in there? Like, did he see my comments? Because it's like, I know I didn't do this, so why did you do that? What led you to believe that was the right path to take? Because I loved it.
Well, for one thing, I have a lot of experience dealing with Rodney Barreto. I've talked to him before. I've been interrupted by him before. So has Phil Goss. So this isn't the first time that I've ever run into him. And I've talked to him privately. We've hung out at the bar and restaurant after an FWC meeting before. I've got his cell phone number in my phone. People might be shocked to believe that, but I've texted him and emailed him. Doesn't mean we see eye to eye, but I've observed him a lot, and in a lot of ways, he's predictable. He doesn't apologize, but he also clearly doesn't understand a lot of what he's talking about. And what I was able to do at the meeting was, when I'm going to have this conversation, I plan in my head how it's going to go, and I can kind of predict how he's going to respond, and I know how I'm going to respond back. So this is not a purely emotional reaction on my part. This is and quite honestly, I know the facts on this a lot better than he does, and I think that was very clear. And it's not because I'm so brilliant or something. It's because I've talked to Chris and Bill multiple times, and I've read the reports, and we should have all the information FWC has on this. We don't, but we should legally. We just don't have a small section of body cam footage, but they're supposed to share all of this with us. So when Barreto said you don't have all the facts, there's no reason we shouldn't have all the facts. As the public, we are entitled to all of the facts on this.
But I don't think he does either. And
no, he doesn't. He clearly doesn't. And he's gotten a briefing on this, but he hasn't studied this. He hasn't talked to all the people involved himself. So it's not hard to have an argument with somebody who's uninformed, honestly, and also somebody who just kind of has emotional outbursts like he does. And I'm generally in pretty good control.
Yeah, but yeah, it seems like you're his nemesis. Yeah.
Well,
tipping.
A lot of people are saying that, and I guess I take pride in that. So thank you.
Yeah, hopefully I was the one that started that at all, because like I was passing that along. Tipping Scales did that Spider-Man one, that episode thing. I didn't care for that as much. Like I thought it was okay. I thought it like put more effort on like that you're successful. That what you did was like the boom, like it's the knockout punch. No, not yet. We're not even close to that knockout punch yet.
You know, I would say I won the exchange.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that we win long term on the issue, which is the ultimate goal. I mean, it was certainly something that made the reptile keepers in the room applaud, which was gratifying, and it many of them were very strong. We had so many strong speakers, and they were well informed.
I loved them
and they were professional. And if I could help them to feel confident in what they were going to say, that's really the whole point of it. So
I mean, every single one of them. Like I'm sitting here at work, like pushing buttons on a computer, going, this like, oh my god. This is, oh, dude, that was, yes. Oh, God, just tears rolling down my face. And, like, as soon as I figure out how to do the tracking thing on faces, I'm going to put something together with the scene from Scent of a Woman. Out of order. This whole court's out of order. If I was 5 years younger, I'd take a flamethrower to this place. That's more appropriate. Because that's literally like, no, that was way more appropriate. And so I loved it, man. I mean, honestly, and I just want to thank every single person that spoke out there. That lead of being adulting. That's the best word we could use.
We had so many. We had people that I'd never met before. And I had people coming up and hugging me at the meeting. I mean, they were hugging for you in a way, people that I'd never met before, but we're all kind of brothers and sisters in this reptile thing. So even if you've never met them before, you kind of know them already. So that was really, really special. That it was.
Went up to the new head guy of staff, the sergeant,
Colonel Young. Yeah, Colonel Roger Young.
I'm so bad with names. I only remember yours because it's written on my undies. Daniel.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, and it's like I just like you just walking up, being the first one to greet him, to set that tone for the future is exactly what I fucking said to Tipping Scales. That's exactly the words that I used. It was like I just like, oh my God, I mean, if you think I'm passionate, right, you're right. And I'm still like those dead snakes still make my stomach turn. I'm still that fucking mad about it. I mean, literally, I have made some pretty freaking crazy videos because of it. But my brain, I am so disgusted and jealous of average people to be able to make other people into just monsters. Because my brain just automatically wants to go. After the first initial anger, and I want to do some really massive, violent things. My brain goes, no. They're just most likely like average people. They're this, they're that. Think about what they probably went through. How did this make them feel? What's the best way to deal with this going forward? I even made a video with Dakota from DBC Exotics on how to deal with people that you may disagree with. the New Year's resolution episode, because once you get past that first part, like there are a lot of things you can do non-verbally to get people comfortable. My Beardy Mom episode was like, okay, so if you don't like beardy moms, I'm a beardy mom, and I'm a proud beardy mom. And if you don't like us, come talk to us. Ask us what we've learned. And that's a step forward, so that I did this to she must have been like between 10 and 13 years old girl. I was talking to somebody else. She walks right up to me and starts chatting me at the show. And her family came over, and I start chatting them up. And I'm like, what have you guys learned from being a beardy mom? What have you guys learned? Oh, we haven't really learned that much. Okay. So then, you know what? Because I have degrees in physics, I understand UV. And I'm like, okay, so any animal that you put in captivity that uses UVB, you should add a grow light at least to it. And what I do is I separate them. And I have learned what that does is they will bask under that UVB and that UVA. So now their bearded dragon, the picture she showed me, looked a little bit obese, not like massively, but like a little overweight. Mine are not. Mine are massively healthy mentally and physically. So it was like, no, you should do this. It'll get the animal to walk more. Now, honestly, would she have really listened to me if I wasn't like caring about them in that manner, that same manner? Maybe, but it definitely helps. And so, I mean, just learning to communicate better that way. I mean, even if you hate somebody and you think like this, it's like, that's not helpful for the animals. That doesn't do a freaking thing for them. If you went after these FWC people and just mad and angry, why would they work with you in the future to save more animals when all this? Because it feels like the reptile community isn't the main goal. Wasn't the main goal of them. You guys are almost like, we're almost like a side project for them, where it's like, well, we have to deal with these people.
Right. And that's part of our issue. It feels like we're in an area that they're not well equipped to handle. And at this point, why would they want to keep dealing with us? I mean, we're nothing but heartache for them anyway. So hopefully they come to that conclusion on their own. But
I always explain to people, when you're conversating with people, every time you leave a conversation, tell that person one thing you liked about them in the conversation. Leave them with that, especially like guys to women. It's like, if you tell her she's attractive, then he only likes me because I'm attractive. If you tell her, well, no, you know what? In that conversation, you were very outgoing. I love that. Like, that's really something I admire in you. And then walk away. Now she's got this, oh, well, it doesn't matter what I look like. As long as I'm outgoing, he's going to like talking to me. And that's a positive thing. Now you've just manipulated her into a positive feeling. And that's going to lead to more positive. Next thing she knows, now you're related to a positive. And so this is absolutely something we can do with FWC officers. And you did it. You did it. I love you, man. Like, I can't say that enough. Like, I don't know if people understand this. Like, this was fantastic. I'm like, oh my God, yes. And so I'm very proud of you. But
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
I'm a scientist, and like, I talk about in a lot of my videos about the chaos theory. I had somebody on USARK, I think it was one of your posts, try to argue with me that invasive species have nothing to do with chaos theory. And it's like, actually, from a mathematical standpoint, they do. Mathematics, chaos theory is about equilibrium. So instead of looking at it as a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan and causes an earthquake in, freaking Neosho, Missouri, it's okay. So if you have a car radio, then when you actually hear music, that's an equilibrium. So as you drive, you create noise. As the weather moves, it creates noise. As cars move around you, they create noise. And so therefore you get static in the radio because it's not at a full equilibrium. So then you have to change the dial, and then so you find another one that plays, that's another equilibrium. So the question when you come to invasive is null or zero equilibrium. Because if you put rabbits on an island, they eat all the plants and they die off. Is that an equilibrium? That's very interesting. But when you're talking about the pythons down there, your studies that I've seen show that they're being eaten and they're eating the wildlife and they're being eaten by the wildlife almost as if they have found kind of a equilibrium in a way in the actual ecosystem down there.
Well, absolutely. I'm certainly not an expert in chaos theory, but I know a little something about ecology. And what has happened with the Burmese pythons is that they have become part of the ecosystem. We have no animal that has come in and just eaten everything and totally destroyed an ecosystem, including the pythons. If they did that, then they would be extirpated. They would go away, because if you eat all of the available food, there's nothing left to eat. But the pythons are continuing to produce babies. They're continuing to somewhat expand their range into the areas that they can, where the temperatures will allow it. So they're not taking over to the point where nothing else can survive with them. And we know that a lot of the animals that pythons eat when they're big also are eating pythons when the pythons are little. So things like raccoons and possums. So you have all this biomass. Basically, ecology is just the transfer of matter, of biomass from one organism to another. So a python is made, there's the saying, you are what you eat. So when you have a big python, yeah, that's made out of all the food items that it ate. But when a crocodile eats the python, which a crocodile is an endangered species, then that matter is being shifted into the crocodile too. So the fact that endangered American crocodiles, as well as our native alligators, indigo snakes are eating pythons, tons of birds are eating lots of pythons. As I said earlier, the possums, the raccoons are eating python eggs. Bobcats are eating python eggs. Everything's eating each other out there. Okay, it's a snake eat snake world, or whatever you want to call it. But nothing is eating something to the point where the other thing doesn't exist anymore, and the balances shift. So we did have a reduction in certain mammal populations for a while. And I would say in Everglades National Park, for years, if you went to the Everglades and camped, you would be mobbed by raccoons. Like, I had them get into my truck one time. They got into my food. They're scratching at your tent at night. There were too many raccoons. And raccoons is what we call a subsidized mesopredator. Yeah. It's subsidized by human beings. It feeds on our trash, it raids our coolers, it eats roadkill. So that's why you see that's why raccoons prosper, even though they become roadkill also. They're eating a lot of the animals that get hit along the road. So raccoons benefit from humans' impacts on the ecosystem. Well, when the pythons really exploded in kind of the I would say the early 2000s, they put a big hit on that raccoon population that was unnaturally common or unnaturally dense and abundant. Those raccoons were eating all of the American crocodile eggs in the Flamingo area of Everglades National Park, like 100%. Crocodiles would nest, the raccoons would eat their eggs, also eating tons of turtle eggs. So what happened when the pythons started eating a lot of the raccoons? The crocodile nests started hatching. And suddenly we started seeing, in the late 2000s, we started seeing baby crocodiles where we hadn't seen baby crocodiles before, because those were actually successfully hatching. Now what we're seeing is that the raccoons have bounced back a little bit. But unfortunately, in the past 3 years, all the python contractors that were being required to document mammals, and they documented this decline in mammals, are not being asked to study them now and collect data as the mammal populations are kind of bouncing back. So we have a study showing the reduction in mammals, but last time I was down in the Everglades, I saw raccoons, I saw marsh rabbits, I saw opossums, I saw mammals in areas where there are pythons. So they're hitting a balance, and we know that raccoons have learned to raid python nests. They're working cooperatively. One raccoon will like go in front of the mama python that's coiled around the eggs, and she'll get her to strike, and other raccoons will come in from behind and scatter the eggs, and they'll eat them. So raccoons are pretty intelligent animals. So none of this stuff is going extinct because of the python there. It has changed the ecology, for sure. We can't argue that it hasn't. But I think sometimes the problem with science being driven by grant money a lot of times is that they are finding things, you have to find things to study that you can get funded. And right now in Florida, studying invasive species or studying non-native species is a way to get your projects funded, because the media has terrified everybody, and FWC has terrified everybody of these invasive species, but they use it all to their own political ends and to get funding. And it's unfortunate because we would all like science to be pure and not just data driven and scientific method. But unfortunately, it seems to be used to prove talking points, which can be used in the media and used
I've got
for
plenty
political
of people
agendas.
up here that are like, pythons are invasive in Florida. We know they're invasive. It's like, stop. I know more than you. They're not invasive. There's this, there's that. It's if we go to the analysis of the radio station, and we actually go, okay, so if mammals are rock music, heavy metal music, and reptiles are classical music, and and fish are freaking pop songs. Then as you turn the dial, so apparently what had happened was that the raccoons, the mammals, the heavy metal was actually so in tune that it was louder than all the other stations. And then as you introduced the actual moved, then the car radio started lowering that and raising the station for classical music for the reptiles. And now we're seeing a shift back. And so I explained to people, politics should be like the actual bacteria. There is actual mathematics for both that fit. A guy won a Nobel Prize for economics. And that John Nash, the guy with the schizophrenia, and it's the game theory stuff. But if we actually consider that, bacteria needs to have ups and downs. So the economy needs to have ups and downs. So when we look at it like that, that's the better way of doing an economy and a political as well. Like if we just stick with one thing, it's going to die off because it's a living system in its own right. If we look at it that way, then a living system should actually change over time. And so that's the most appropriate thing that we could do. And as we look at that, when we realize, okay, so yeah, they changed the economy, the actual landscape, and lowered the mammals, and now the mammals are coming back. And so now we need something that actually, we need this to keep shifting. We don't want it to stay steady. But most people.
And one thing, if you talk about, I'd always considered myself a naturalist, and I'm kind of hesitant to use that term sometimes. As far as being an observer of the natural world, yes, but I think that a lot of naturalists want to preserve something. They want to preserve what is natural, but what are we trying to go back to, or what are we trying to? In Florida, we're so impacted. Our wetlands have been cut up with canals. All of our habitats have been fragmented by roads and by subdivisions and shopping centers, so heavily impacted. We have chemicals, we have tons of pollution. So we've heavily impacted the environment in so many ways. We're never going to go back to whatever ideal we're trying to go back to. I don't know what that is even. Is that over 100 years ago? Is that pre-industrial revolution? Is that going back to the time of the Native Americans? You know, when the first people arrived to North America across the Bering Strait, we had megafauna. We had saber-toothed tigers, and we had mastodons, and we had giant armadillos, and we had 5 giant tortoise species in Florida. Well, those all went away, a lot of them partly due to the impacts of early man here. So they were way more tortoises, they killed off the saber-toothed tigers, you know. So what point in history is the ideal time to go back to, is the question I'm asking. I think a better objective is for us to have healthy ecosystems with lots of life. And what concerns me with like the way FWC manages things in Florida is that they consider invasive species or non-native species such the enemy that, for instance, with our non-native plants like water hyacinth, water lettuce, these are plants that are very conducive to a productive environment. Lots of animals eat them. Manatees eat invasive, what we consider invasive plants. They eat water hyacinth, they eat water lettuce, they eat hydrilla. Fish love hydrilla. Bass fishermen love hydrilla. Turtles eat hydrilla. Turtles eat water hyacinth. Salamanders, aquatic salamanders, use water hyacinth. They use the root systems as refuge. And in fact, record densities of amphibians and herps in general have been documented using water hyacinth roots in Florida. But now FWC sprays all of these areas, all of our wetlands and all of our waterways, there are a lot of them anyway, with herbicides. And that's been immensely detrimental. But this is all in the name of eliminating an invasive species. But what happens is we're left with barren canals, which were artificial waterways to start with almost no life. So they spray all the plants, and they do this multiple times a year. So there's barely a native emergent plant there or a non-native floating plant. There's just nothing. So you don't have fish, or you don't have high densities. You don't have a natural biodiversity there. You have this barren, sterile environment, actually a toxic environment. So it's just unfortunate that non-natives can be the excuse to totally wreck the environment, which is what we've seen in Florida. It's like if you have a non-native species there, it's almost not even worth saving, which is a really sad way to look at it from my perspective.
Yeah. Father Fish said something that I actually liked. He was talking about the fact that land developers are the freaking people in charge of FWC. And it's like, he really believes that they want the land of the fish hatcheries because they sit in actual ideal locations. And it's like they want to actually develop those. So even the Young Turks called Ron DeSantis new law that says that the Chinese can't buy land and farmland in Florida as a good thing. Well, us as animal keepers, we understand that his donors are land developers. So there's laws in the past for different states that say that investment people can't buy property, private residence, for 45 days. There's also such things as zombie laws, where if they let a house sit and decay, they can be fined, and eventually those fines get so high that the city is allowed to take that from them and rebuild it into something else. Mm-hmm. And so if he wanted to protect you guys, you Floridians, that's the stuff he would have done. He would have made it impossible for investment people, period. to buy private property and stuff for at least a year. No farms, no nothing. And then that would have stopped a lot of that stuff. All this does is lower the market, the amount of people in the market. And so it lowers it for his land developers, because there's no way you as a Floridian is going to make enough money to compete with investment corporations. So there is no help for you guys. It sounds wonderful, and everybody's going to go, yeah, no, I'm for not giving China land. But domestic people are taking your land. They're killing you. They're killing the land. They're doing all that. This is an actual big thing, and they are not helping you as a land person, as a Floridian. And so it's very fascinating that. And so when we actually look at that and we start going, okay, so I'm trying to think of what I was, because honestly, like I said before, I believe in good regulations. So Ron DeSantis isn't actually helping you guys. And so you guys actually have to fight in a different way. I knew that you guys were not going to get help from Ron DeSantis. I was 99.9% sure. And there's reasons for that. And I'm actually good at understanding people. That point one was if somebody in his office actually helped. So now you guys have to go about it differently. And the way you're actually going about it, I love it. Like you guys, like I said it again, I'll say it again. It's like you literally got into my brain and went, okay, so like I can't, it's so wonderful. So for me, understanding this is important. How many of the herpetologists that I've had on that actually, I ask the question, how do you get laws passed in your state? And they have a reason, they have a way to do it. And most people don't understand that the boards of the FWCs around the country and stuff are not elected officials, but they do want your help and putting more input. So and that's why, because I want a law passed that says you need a license to own any type of exotic animal, and you have to take a $20 test to get it. Now, Utah has a $10 test to get local herps out of the wild. I recommend everybody go look at it. You can see the answers right there on the board. As you click the buttons, you can actually go up and redo it and stuff. You have to get a certain score. And rescues are behind me because this would actually, Bill Strand's like, no, I don't like that because more regulations. I'm like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'm not here to put this in to restrict you from buying the animal. I'm wanting to actually put this in for people to put more thought into buying the animal. And that's what it's for. It's not actually, it's to put that little rock in the pebble that makes you have to walk around it. So you actually have to put thought into it. Shrinking the roads and making it more this way. And I would encourage people just to go take that test from Utah. It's so basic. Mm-hmm. It's just so basic. And then use that $20 for conservation. People don't understand. Most conservation isn't funded properly in any state. That's why it's so rare that Missouri actually has taxes. And it's like a penny or two on certain things. And it's not just, hunting and fishing license. Yeah. But then also people don't understand that the federal government matches that funds of the states. And so it's really crucial. And like you said, when you actually put people that are actually leadership roles that actually want to help conservation, it works. It works wonders because these people actually care. They're not just here to push stuff in your face and like control. That doesn't work. Control does the exact opposite. People go underground. This has been proven over and over and over again. And
that we are concerned that will happen. I mean, we know people love their animals, so when you just tell them you can't, you're not allowed, a lot of people aren't going to accept that. And
they're more likely.
One of the issues we have with FWC, we're saying that you should be creating regulations that people can comply with. Your goal should be compliance. But it seems to be just discouraging people from even wanting to do it or have a license. But in the long run, that's not good, because if it goes all underground and black market, then they're not going to see most of it. So they have this kind of imaginary vision, I think, of them being able to catch everybody that breaks the law. But the reality is that they're not going to catch most of them. They'll catch some of them.
And that's exactly why the whitelist will not, absolutely 100% will not work. And I'm huge on conservation. So when they tell you, no, we want to restrict this because we want to keep diseases out. Okay, I'm for keeping diseases out, but you're not going to do that with that law. I can tell you for a fact, 100% fact, that you are going to contribute more. People get on to me for my quarantine video on the Peter Banded skinks. Oh, well, you need loose substrate in there. It's like, no, because if they have a disease, if they have parasites, it gets into the substrate and then you have to throw it out, and then that increases it getting out into the wild. There's actually things to this. There's actually conservation efforts in actually trying to cure diseases in your animals that you get in. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I mean, I encourage people to look at your state laws, look at how you're funded, and actually fund conservation, fund your FWCs for the most part.
Yeah.
And then,
well, one of the issues that we see, though, is that we have the largest law enforcement force of any state wildlife agency. We have 900 FWC officers. So much of our budget for FWC goes to law enforcement, and it doesn't seem to be going to conservation. I mean, we know they have cool stuff. They have helicopters, they have drones, they have tanks or whatever. They're kind of paramilitary in a way. But, and it's not that we're anti-police or anti-law enforcement or anything, but where are the priorities here in the agency? Their biologists, leave them. A lot of them, the morale is poor amongst their biologists. They don't get paid enough, and a lot of them are doing really good work, but they can't seem to hold on to their good biologists. So, there's a question of priorities in the agency. I would like to see a conservation agency get funds to be able to do conservation. And I think that conservation is a whole lot more than just law enforcement. It's not all, whether it's policing, animal keepers, or even, whatever, looking at what fishermen are catching or counting points on antlers. I mean, all that stuff's important, but that is not the only thing that goes into conservation. The biggest thing is protecting and managing land, and I wish that was a bigger objective at our conservation organization.
Phil doesn't like my idea. Phil Gross, he doesn't like it. He's told me personally. He's like, no, I'm not okay. It's going to lead to more regulations, and it's like, I understand that. That doesn't mean my idea is bad, and yet I still support USARK. Period. Because what they have been able to do, like you said, how many bad laws have they been able to get off the books, to get out of being passed? This is like, we should be studying how he's doing this, how we are doing this, and we should be doing this. And this is some things that I've been learning here recently. Because we absolutely should. Michigan is doing the exact opposite thing that Florida has done. They have actually, a lady, because the herpetologists I've been talking to are like, no, you can go and talk to the boards. You can put stuff forward. The bees being labeled as fish was somebody testing whether they could get bees special treatment so that they could actually do that in California. That was something that it didn't pass correctly, like what they were hoping it would, but they were trying. And that's the stuff we want. We want involvement by the people. They have to be involved. What they did in Michigan wasn't conservation. It was actually, they took a red state, deeply red, and made it friendly for the voters. This lady in 2018 saw that her family was about to get broken up because of Trump being put in office. So therefore, she had them, every single one, go, okay, so voters over donors. So it's an actual deal where a lot of states, people can put laws, that's actually what happened in Missouri, is that they had a ballot initiative to do taxes for conservation. And that's where that tax comes from. People voted to have it on there. And what they did in Michigan was now it's easier to get things on the ballot. Now, for Intrepid Exotic, he's in North Carolina right now. He needs this. They need to be doing this because something just happened in North Carolina where they raised the threshold from 51% to have something put on the ballot to in the upper 50s somehow. And the governor vetoed it. All the Republicans came out and they had to have every single vote. And they got it. And so it passed. So now there is absolutely no reason that you should ever have to have a threshold over 40%. You are asking too much to have something put on a ballot there. But if you're talking about something under 25%, now you're going, okay, so the white supremacists and people like that can put things on the ballot easier if you make it too low. So what you want to do is you want to that 30 to 40% range should be the proper thing because you should be able to get people involved in that and get the signatures enough to where you can put that on a ballot. So what North Carolina needs to do right now is to have 70% of their people put it back on the ballot to have it lowered to 30%. So therefore, and to have them pass it. So therefore, they can actually do this stuff. This would actually help us as pet keepers. Like I said, Missouri made that law for conservation for taxes from an initiative like this. This gives us power where we have heard for so many years that we no longer have power, that it's the government. No, there is ways for us to do this and feel growth.
Well, I got to tell you, though, in Florida, they've gone the direction of making it more difficult to get it to get referendums on the ballot. So, it's only getting more difficult in Florida, not the other way. I'm not familiar with all the exact numbers there, but I know it's gotten more difficult.
Oh yeah, no, the sunshine laws are going away because of Ron. These are things that you have to change. You don't have to vote for Democrats. This is not a party. This is not about party politics. I didn't understand what the hell I love Clint's Reptiles. But for him to say this is a non-political issue, no, it's a non-party issue because freaking blue and red states do bad animal laws. This is true. I mean, we have to be careful because we do have, we have reptile keepers and supporters of all political persuasions, honestly. So we are not a partisan organization. But you do sometimes observe the individual politicians who behave a certain way. And, there are certain ones that haven't been good for us. So, I'm not going to get too deep into that, but you should look into that. Yes.
What are an individual politician's stances on a lot of these issues? And do you want them in power? Is it worth it for everything else? Because It seems like we have a lot of voters that are concerned with some of the major social issues. Like I said, I don't want to get too far into this political stuff.
You're right.
But they'll support a candidate who is actually against the way that they make their living, say that's a reptile business, because they're concerned about other social issues that they're concerned with and how that politician stands. And they let that supersede their own ability to make a living sometimes, which is always a little mystifying to me. So, when you're voting, try to look at how that leader or how that politician has treated our community.
And this idea, like, that was what the lady started that movement on voters, not donors movement. That's how that started, was because she didn't want the infighting of politics. Because I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. We all agree that there's corruption in politics. And that right there will drive us together. It was interesting. I talk about that I don't have a lot of viewers. I saw that your views went from like 20 people on average, 20 or 30, maybe 60 at best, to like over 200 for every single Instagram after the snake thing. We shouldn't
for like the lives. Yeah.
We shouldn't have to have tragedies, but tragedies can lead. Joplin, Missouri, after the tornado, grew massively after roads have come in because of a tragedy. So hopefully this brings us together, because it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. You want money out of politics, and the best way to do that is to actually lower the threshold to put your own stuff, to put people's stuff on the actual ballots themselves. So if you think it's a bad law, you have the right to put something on the ballot that takes it away. You have the right to put something on the ballot that does something else. You have the right to do that as an individual, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Everybody should be for this. And so this is how we get animal laws passed as well. And so understanding that, and it's just one of those things that we have to do that. And there's no reason why, as animal keepers, we can't be in support of that too. I mean,
yeah, and one of my, to that end also, I mean, we have to be careful as animal keepers, especially reptile keepers, with believing that the public supports what we do a lot of the time, or that they understand what we do. And that's part of my media strategy, is also informing the public in a way that normal people can understand who are not reptile people, to kind of change our image a bit. I mean, I feel like, you know, in the 90s, we had this period where, I think because of the Crocodile Hunter and some of the other shows on TV, where people started to see snakes in a different way, though. They actually saw snakes in a more positive way. And I felt that snakes' public image had improved. And then I feel like with the python, all these negative python stories especially, and a lot of that is promoted by FWC, sadly. I mean, they've waged media campaigns against reptiles that have demonized reptiles, and people don't now, every time they see a snake, they think it's a python, or they think negative things instead of positive things. And that's unfortunate, but that's part of what we have to do, is educate the public. And part of that is part of our media strategy as an organization also, is we need for people to see reptiles in a more positive light.
And reptile keeping isn't for everybody. I explain reptiles versus dogs like this. It's my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother loved you no matter what. She's a saint. She's like a dog. I mean, no matter what you do, no matter how bad I was, she loved me no matter what. You don't really appreciate it usually till it's gone. But reptiles are like my grandfather. It's that hard love. You earned that love. If you bond with a reptile, you've earned it. It is not given freely. And so for people, that creates more self-esteem, more self-importance in them. They're like, I did this. This is me. Like, I did this. This is a bond for us. This is why it's so rewarding to get new reptiles, because they're creating that new bond. But this is also why Facebook is so harsh on us over dogs, then because of that self-importance. So we need to temper that down, and we need to explain that, no, you just feel more self-important because you've done this. And that goes into communication and stuff. And that's why we probably, from a neurological standpoint, actually love our reptiles more than people love their dogs. And in a roundabout way, it depends on the person too. Like, does the person really need another person in their life that is going to support them unconditionally? Then they'll probably love a dog over a reptile. But for other people that need to feel like they've earned something, then they're probably going to love reptiles more than dogs when they get them. Doesn't mean you don't love your dogs. That's not at all. I just don't have them because of my lights, and I don't want the dogs running around and knocking off lights, setting fires. It's the only reason I don't own dogs or anything. Cats. So I'm safety.
Mm-hmm.
And these are my babies. Like, I go to the, like I said, I go to the local lake, and I thought you would have a baby in that stroller. I'm like, it's my scaly baby. It's my scaly baby. And I had one guy, he goes, yeah, you tell her. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So I just want people to understand that we should be supporting USARK over PETA. We should be fighting to have standards lowered, to have things put on a ballot that we want on ballots. We should be fighting for conservation because we are reptile keepers. Don't just think because you own a reptile, that makes you conservational friendly. No, you need to make sure that people are not pulling too many out of the wild. You need to make sure that I've got Peter Bandit skinks, so I do have wild animals that are caught from the wild. And I will breed them. I will take 3 years to study the actual babies. I will do something with that. I am not just going to sit here and breed them and go, I'm great because I'm a breeder of these and that's great. No, I'm going to do something more. And you can. Conservation doesn't have to just be, oh, well, keeping this or keeping that or some dribble. Like I said, if you're a math person, you can do data science for conservation. You can do all these different things, computer programming. They're doing it in Utah, the iNatural. That should be a nationwide thing. Like, that should just be naturally nationwide. All of this, everything that I have been fighting for in these videos are so awesome to see how we could connect all these together. I mean, and we don't think about the amphibians. I mean, under Trump, there was a law placed that you can actually write off your airplanes, your private jets off your taxes. Well, it's fair because anybody can write off their private jet. Really? So why can we not have we cannot have tax breaks to have things like friendlier yards, like biodiversity ponds in our yards, so that amphibians can actually lay their eggs in it? Why can we not get tax write-offs for that? Thinking about running for office here in Missouri or actually in the federal, and it's like, what could I do that would actually get passed to take power away from people that don't deserve it, that can't use it properly? So what if we did more of being able to write off, make it impossible for cities and HOAs to enforce penalties for having a biodiverse lawn? Why that sounds like something that could actually get passed, even in Missouri and other places where like that. And now we've taken some power away. It doesn't mean you don't keep up your lawn. You just have it biodiverse. And there are places out there that are actually doing that. Like, I put that on something and I've gotten so much feedback and only one negative comment. Everybody else is like, yeah, or they're already doing this in Colorado. They're doing this in Michigan. These are things that we can get on ballots that will actually pass, that everybody's for. Nobody is for HOAs. So to take power away from that, and the one person's like, oh, well, we should be able to sue our neighbors for pests. So it's a good thought. It's an interesting thought, and I don't criticize them for making it. Those are the type of thoughts we need. We need that feedback. That's one reason why I still love Phil, because he does have those feedbacks. Like, that's not like, I don't hate constructive criticism. It's welcome. So thinking about it that way, we haven't taught those people about actual freaking pests, what they really mean. Because what if we did away with, what if we encouraged people to have lizards in their walls? I can't tell you how many people I have at work that have come up to me. They know I love my lizards. They know I love them to death. They're my world. And they're like, you know what? This little blue tail lizard I have running in my walls, this little skink. And I thought about catching it and bringing it to you. And I'm like, no, it's eating the bugs. Go, boy, go. One lady on Facebook talked about, she was asking what plants can she plant in Ohio to actually increase those in her yard. Oh, my God, I teared up. I was so proud. I loved it. That's what we should be pushing. Stop with the pesticides. And I will admit right now, I work for Bayer Crop Science. I work for Monsanto's. I am a chemist for them. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But
well, then your product is being sprayed all over Florida, I think.
We actually talked about that today. There was actually somebody in our, because I work between formula and seed treatment. My job is to actually do studies between formula and seed treatment and the customer. So and they actually talked about that. They're like, no, there's like, so just because you work there doesn't mean we don't understand the problem. And they literally were like, no, they shouldn't be spraying pesticides and herbicides everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, they're doing that in Florida, killing the damn manatees. And it sucks, man. I mean, but so I really encourage people to look at your laws, look at your state laws, contact your state herpetologist. And not every state has it. Oregon, I interviewed a Fish and Wildlife from Montana. She pointed me at the Heritage Foundation over there, that they actually do their herpetology. They don't actually have a herpetologist on staff. So there are these things that we need to understand, and then we need to actually be pushing for this stuff. We need to be pushing for the increase of knowledge, because there's always another way. And pests, oh, well, all these snakes are pests. Are they? Or are they eating the mice that you think are pests? I mean, seriously, like that. Ryan McVeigh, I talked to him a long time ago, and he was talking about a gecko that got loose in his enclosure room. And he's like, I've never really tried to catch it because it's still fat. So it's eating the bugs in the room that get loose. It's like, I'm like, okay, so I check on it, make sure it's healthy, and we go on. I'm like, that's where we need to be headed. Even the lady that I have from India talked about it. She's like, I'm terrified of the lizards. We let them in the house still in India because they eat the bugs. Mm-hmm. And she's terrified of them. I mean, this is something that we need to understand. So that just shows us that we're not teaching enough people about pests. What pests really are. Biodiversity. The more biodiversity we have, the actual better conservation we have in America. And then the better conservation we have in America, the better our atmosphere will be. And when it comes to bans, understanding that bans only work if the actual population, the actual people have already accepted the solution to the problem before the ban. So when we got rid of the stuff that was killing the ozone in our air conditioning units, we were actually okay with that because we didn't lose air conditioning. We accepted the actual deal, and we repaired our ozone. None of this is, oh, well, we have to give up actually living correctly. No, we don't. And as a matter of fact, if you're like, well, diseases and all this other stuff, like what I talked about before, you need that swing. And I see it in the Peter Bandit skink. When I have babies, They die quicker when they get to upper respiratory infections than the adults do, because the adults can handle it better, because they already went through it as children and they survived it. If it wasn't for modern medicine, we as people would not be as big as we are now. So this is stuff. So learning modern medicine, the degrees that I have and that I put on that video, you can actually lower the amount of animals being tested on that way. We can look to actually herps to find new things. The fence lizard, Lyme disease cure. Like, there's so many things that we don't know. They're studying crocodiles. Ryan McVeigh was talking about they're studying crocodiles or alligators or crocodiles because they don't get dementia. That's a big one for me. That lovely lady, it's one of the only topics that I don't want to talk about. My grandmother, the fucking saint, had Alzheimer's. It is the most horrendous thing ever. And I will never be okay with not putting science towards that. If it wasn't so hard on me, I found out years ago it was the only thing that I have ever held back from myself. I literally pushed it out of my mind until several years back, and I found it again, and it just broke me. It's something that I will always be fighting for. This is why I was so big on learning to target cancer and do new technology and science. So we can push that to the animals. So if you don't like people, these are things that we can still push to help animals. There's so much left to learn. And I mean, if you hate learning, I don't know how to help you. I mean, what are some of your thoughts on anything? Because we'll probably wrap up.
Well, I appreciate a lot of what you said. I'm certainly devoted to learning the whole rest of my life. I think anybody, once you shut yourself down and you think you know everything, then you become a pretty uninteresting person. So that's to me what science is. It's the constant thirst for knowledge and wanting to learn. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and for people out there, if you guys want me to go over every state, what it takes to get something on the ballot, because this is important. This is massively important. And it's nonpartisan. I don't care if you're a Republican, if you're an asshole. I don't care. If you're a Democrat, if you're corrupt, it doesn't matter. You should want this for every single state to lower and to have between 30 and 40% signatures to have to get something on the ballot. That is doable, and that is respectful, and that is something that we should be pushing for in every single state to give the people power back to them. Like, it just doesn't even matter what your political view is.
Yeah.
And if you want to help conservation, that's a big one to do. And I don't see why you couldn't get 90% of a state to say yes on that. I don't know why. So it shouldn't be hard to get 57 or 60%.
Well, Florida is a very special place sometimes.
Yeah, and just like California, most people are like, well, they're hippies, they're this and they're that. And it's like, nah, the sunshine laws in Florida have made you guys really look bad. And maybe some of the people I've met may not have been the best examples of Florida people. But it's not all bad. Like you said, the herpetologists in FWC aren't usually that bad. It's the other things. And most herpetologists have to have masters or more. That's a big thing too. So if you put the passion in to get a master's, yeah, you're probably going to be more passionate in conservation, because that takes a lot of effort. That's not just something that just happens. I couldn't get a master's because I couldn't afford to go to school. I got into the master's program, but it was like going to be like $400 a month for a stipend. And it's like, I can't live off of that. I can't do it. So I had to go into the field. So I've worked for pharmaceutical companies, and that's why I'm here at, Bayer Crop Science. So no, it's one of those things. Like, and I encourage people, go out and get these weird degrees, apply them in new ways. And the more we actually have that understanding of these new degrees, the more we could actually have saved freaking Brian Barchuk. Like, if this stuff was more common, the actual more likely that we could have found a way to save Brian Barchuk. That's not a joke. I literally studied how to target cancer cells. So we could actually have lowered the damage to his body while actually destroying his actual tumor, his cancer. But I don't know if they're doing that, if that's what they're doing or not. What they're doing is supposed to be really bad. So these are things. And then you could lead into actually saving animals that way too. Like, there's so many things that we can do. You just have to step outside the bubble. Oh, yeah, the one thing that I've learned over this empathy stuff, there's so many people like screaming about the FWC officers. Like, they need more empathy. You need more empathy. They need more empathy. And it's like, no, they most likely have the same amount of empathy that everybody else does. Knowledge is more important, and even more important than that is who you spend time with. Think of Beretta. Think of all the people that he had to spend time with to get to that mental capacity, to think that he is actually that intelligent and not to look to other people. That is not real intelligence. I tell people we should be measuring intelligence on how willing you are to go to somebody else that you think knows more than you on a topic. That should be measurement of intelligence. And so to think that Beretta is an actual man with empathy that is still not as caring, because he doesn't surround himself with people that are caring, and he probably surrounds him with people that think that they're above things, that they're authority, rich people most likely, that think that they are special. And so if we could surround him with other people that aren't, you are likely to get some type of change. But because he is over the age of 30, you won't get the change as dramatically as if you started young. I love what Bill Stewart is doing with kids, creating their empathy, but I do worry that they're going to become more like me. And like, there's issues with my empathy. I don't always have control. That's why I'm so jealous of people being able to just say that other people are monsters. And I'm like, man, I just can't do it. And I'm so jealous of that.
Well, maybe that's a good thing.
You would think so, but the mental stress, I handle stress better than most, and I could imagine just a normal person having to feel the way that I feel so often. I don't want that for them. They shouldn't have to deal with that. That's why I'm actually okay with normal amounts of empathy, because there's a reason why normal people are normal people. Like, there's a reason why it's actually a regular thing to not have this type of empathy, because you don't always have control over it. The things that it can lead you to are dark thoughts that are not always for everybody. That if you can't get away from those thoughts, but my brain's like chaos, so like 5 minutes from now I'll like be on like this like 5 different topics. So that's why I can deal with it so well. I've never in my whole life ever had a suicidal thought in my life. Just because you have more empathy doesn't mean that you're a good person. It doesn't actually mean that, but it does help. It's how you use it, and how you use it is mostly based on who you surround yourself with. And that's why that goes back to why I just want to give you a pat on the back, a cookie, and a hug, because I love you, man. You are awesome. I just want people to understand how just wonderful you are. I can't say it enough. Like, you literally pulled it out of my brain, and you're like, hey, yeah. And I'm like, oh, my God. That's how we're supposed to behave. We are supposed to be the example. And we saw that when you did the example, people followed. I just like.
Well, thank you so much. On that note, on our virtual hug here, I think I probably ought to go because my phone that I'm recording on right now is running out of battery.
Hey, I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything about you. I appreciate you probably stayed on this long because of you like that. I understand, like, because you the other day. Yeah, I get it. I appreciate you. I really do. Like, thank you so much. I hope to work with you in the future. If you ever need to think about, like, I don't know, just anything, just holler.
Well, I appreciate everything that you add to the conversation. It's always interesting. And yeah, thank you so much. And you know, anybody watching, if you want to be involved in what we're doing, you can follow USARK Florida on all of our social media. We're on just about everything now. We're on YouTube. So go over and give us subscribe to us on YouTube. And we'd love to have you join USARK Florida also. But
would you want me to send this to you guys or USARK? Because like it would probably get more views if somebody else produced this part.
Well, I mean, we are a separate organization from USARK.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can talk about that. But yeah, we're funded separately and everything. So that's one thing people need to know when they're donating also, that if you're interested in what's going on in Florida, that USARK Florida is the organization that deals with what's happening in Florida.
Yeah, in that video, Trusting USARK Florida, I will only put you guys, not USARK. In this one, I would put USARK and USARK Florida and stuff. Usually I put you both when I do things. And I do take them to the donation page or the membership page kind of thing.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I am going to lose you here soon because my phone is starting to blink. So, yeah, but thank you for having me on. And I appreciate, like I said, everything you add to the conversation. You're always an interesting part of the conversation. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.